Hello, and welcome to Right to Be Wrong, the show that revives the art of conversation, accommodating varied views on sports, culture, politics, world events, and every topic under the sun. After all, you have a right to be wrong. Here are your hosts, Dave and Tony.
I'm going to assault your ears. How have you been, my friend?
Good, Dave. Busy, wrapping up another year, trying to get the kids sorted out, and then trying to justify, rationalise, understand exactly what I achieved this year, and I'm struggling. But all good. How about you?
Yeah, it's just briefly. We are recording the day after a terrible event here in Sydney. We had a discussion what we're going to talk about tonight. That won't be the case at the moment. We're going to focus on something else. We might touch on a couple of things off the back of that, but just briefly from my perspective as a Sydney boy, born and raised as a strong Australian, I thought I'm going to focus positive. Thought for the terrible things yesterday, I saw some amazing stuff from some amazing people, uniformed and otherwise. I do know, obviously, at the moment, the people know who the perpetrators are, but I will give a shout out to someone called Ahmed El Ahmed, who I thought had the balls and showed what being Australian is, because it's not a religion, it's not an eye shape, it's not a skin color. It's about your fellow citizen being part of what is a great country, what we hope to continue to be a great country. And for anyone that does know what I'm talking about the guy that had the balls to go up and tackle the guy with the shotgun and save, who knows, one life, 1,000 lives, because for all we know, that guy was headed to trigger the IED. So to him, Australian of the Year so far in my books. You've got balls of steel, and I hope you recover quickly.
Here, Dave. Here. That was just amazing, just to watch it. I'm just deflated. There's no words to describe it. I'm just annoyed. I'm frustrated. I'm just a whole lot of things. So that's why I'd rather not delve into it too deeply. But we will touch on it tonight because both topics kind of lean into that, especially the first one and the second one. So we'll just see how we go. But tonight, Dave, we are answering a core question. Are there too many lawyers and are there too many laws?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, listeners. And then we'll be back next week.
Yeah, right to be wrong. I think that if you walked the street and asked this question, and not so much the too many lawyers, but if you ask the average citizen, and not just Australia, I think this is a Western Civ problem. I think if you asked every person that you randomly ran into on the street for, let's call it 10,000 people, it'd be a very good sample size, you would find an overwhelming majority believe we're overregulated and over-legislated. And I think one of the reasons, I think there's a few reasons for that. One, we've created a bit of a world where when things go wrong, we think legislation and regulation is the answer. That's
or government.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And we don't want to accept that life comes with some inherent risks. It comes with some bad people. It comes with some problems. So you need your laws and regulations to set, in the safety of your community. You want a clear criminal code. In the business world, you want a level, fair playing field. Amongst citizens, you want clear rights as well as obligations. But every time something goes wrong, and this is where I'll briefly touch on the sad events of Bondi, all day today, what I'm hearing about is gun control. Now, Australia has some of the strictest gun regulations in the world, but we don't particularly have a strong gun culture. But again, to me, this is a mistake to think that someone that's prepared to go and kill, let's run with thousands, because they would have gone with as many as they could. Do you really think they go, oh, wait, I've only got one gun, the other 5 are illegal. I'm going to get in real trouble for this terrorist attack because these 5 guns are illegal. This naive belief that the answer is more regulation, and we saw it even in the civil world, where I read something last week that the Australian government has admitted that their estimates of lost excise on tobacco last financial year alone was $12.6 billion, because their answer was to over-regulate, legislate, drive up the taxes, and you create a black market. So sometimes in life we need to accept that things are going to go wrong, but we can't fix every problem with another law. Now, just on the tail end of that, I would also suggest one of the problems, if you look at the Australian government in particular, our Congress, or the equivalent of Congress and Senate, so our House of Representatives, now Senate, is chock full of lawyers. So what's a lawyer always think when there's a problem? A, they're risk averse, and B, they think, more legislation.
Because we can change behaviour through legislation, right?
Yeah, allegedly.
Yeah, I know. So you're right, Australia does produce a large number of law graduates annually relative to the population. Law's become a default degree.
I have one.
I say again, law has become a default degree.
No, I mean,
hang on, for high achieving students, even if they never practice, right?
But exactly.
And there's an oversupply at junior levels, but the demand is not driven by justice alone.
Now, let me just clarify something too, because you just made a really good point when you said if they never practice. There's a misconception in the community, if you have a law degree, you're a lawyer. So there are two things to clarify here. One is when you complete, assuming you do, say, an LLB, which is a Bachelor of Laws, or you do a Juris Doctor, which is effectively a fancy title for the exact same thing, but if you've already got an undergrad degree, you've got to do it. You then need to be admitted to the bar, and then you need to get your unrestricted practicing certificate. So there's a number of layers. You can have a law degree like I do, which is a postgraduate degree, but it doesn't allow me to practice law. So it's now, mind you, it's not the one thing I'd say about holding a law degree at any type. So whether it's a Bachelor of Laws, a Master's, a Juris Doctor, the thing I would say is values. Once you understand the basics of contract formation, tortious liability, administrative law, ethics foundations, like there's value that you could be working in Combank as a branch manager, and you'll start to pick up if there's some issues and red flag it off to your office general counsel and could save the CBA millions, right? So it's not a wasted degree, but too many people, I'm going to do law, I'm going to save the world. If you went around and asked how many people, you ask people who are doing law why they're doing law, sometimes the answer is not really what you want to hear, because they have this inherent belief in I'm going to change the world. Like I'll have this degree and away I go. I'll relay a quick story. When I was in international law and use of force at UNSW, it was one of those courses that was done over block. So 2 weekends, Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. That was your four long days of equivalent tutorials for a semester. It's about 30 people doing this subject. The guy running it was a former lawyer from the UN. He said, stick your hand up if you're doing international law because you want to work at the United Nations. And every hand went up except mine. And he turned around and he says, well, I consider it my job to make sure you never do, because I went there as a 27-year-old young lawyer. I had the dreams. I thought I was going to make a difference. And you find out you get there and your job is to ensure those in power remain in power. So there was too many people that kept thinking that I'm getting this degree to go and change the world. To me, you shouldn't really study anything unless I accept if someone goes, I'm doing this because I think that's the most amount of money. That's what I want to do. Take that. That's a good answer for me. I'm doing this because I'm interested. Tick. That's a good answer for me. I'm doing this because I grew up with my mum being bashed by my dad, and I want to be, fight for women in domestic violence. Tick. These are all good answers. But a lot of people are going into things wanting to change the world via legislation. If you want to change something, start with changing yourself. Because if we all take the small step to stop doing the things that we do wrong, and we all do wrong, the world will be a better place anyway.
No, I agree with all that, Dave. I think
stop the podcast.
No.
Tone. Let me tell you another quick story.
Yep.
And I was going to save this for later, but I'll tell you now because I need you to be on this. Someone said to me today, Dave, I listened to your episode, blah, blah, blah. Tell me about Tony. What's Tony do? What's Tony's background? Well, I said, well, Tony, he was a figure skater and a male model. No, I said Tony's an accountant by background.
In the underground.
Yeah.
In the underground Detroit skating scene.
He's got a tattoo of Oksana
Trouble?
by Hull.
If you call a 9-year-old boy going out with a 32-year-old woman trouble, yeah, I was trouble.
So anyway, he says to me, he goes, all right, the podcast was working really well with Tony. I like Tony. I like when he gives it to you sometimes. He goes, he's funny, he's smart. So if you're going to keep agreeing with me, I'm going to have to go back to that guy and say, "Oh, the podcast has fallen apart."
Oh, no.
Because Tony's just agreeing with me.
I know,
all the
too much
time.
agreements. But you are right. There does seem to be, even like without pulling any data, a lot of people I speak to, especially younger people in that cohort who go to uni, what are you doing? It's typically law something.
Yeah.
Law something, right? But you're right. There are basics that I learned in the 3 or 4 units I did in law going back 30 years ago around contracts, how they're structured, legislation, how it's enacted, but more so around the contracts law, where the liability sits, protections against liability, all of that stuff. If you get a basic understanding of that, that can always help you at least have a first cut business view of a contract. And then, as you said, and this is what we do at work, let me take a good look. Practically, this all makes sense. That's some legal gobbledygook that I reckon opens them up to get out a back door, get my counsel to check that out, and a couple other bits and pieces. And that should be it. But there are, it's interesting that there isn't like an oversupply of lawyers at the more junior level, but there's an undersupply of engineers or tradies at the other end. Yeah. So if we break it down, Dave, when I think too many laws and I think too many regulations, the first thing my mind goes to is small business, right?
Oh, without doubt. The people that love overregulation and compliance are big business because it becomes a barrier to entry for small business.
That's right. And I remember, 3, 4, 5 months ago, I was on X and I was tweeting with someone, and there was an issue where a small business person was complaining about something that the government was doing or not doing. And I've gone, listen, we all want government out of the way, and then as soon as they do get out of the way and the market fails, everyone wants to dip in their hand and help, right? Everyone wants the government to bail them out. And he called me up on it. He said, listen, we don't want any bailouts. But a small business, I can tell you, the small business that he ran, and I forget what he did, he quoted like 35 different regulations and laws that he has to follow and submit paper to and comply with. He goes, that's the real cost of running a small business in Australia. It's the fact that you're over-regulated. There's lots of check boxes. There's lots of liability to make sure you're not exposed to, and it literally just drowns you in overhead.
Well, I think to try and come up with the one through line of how we got to this, I would suggest it was the time in society we decided we want to remove the responsibility and the accountability from the individual. So we don't want to have to say, or we stopped making you accept you were drunk, you weren't watching where you're walking, you tripped down the stairs, bad luck. It's your problem, right? What we want to do is we want to start to have someone to blame for everything.
The old slip and fall, Dave.
Well, it's even things like, right, let's look at a Christmas party, right? It's that time of year, we're in Christmas. People that would take out their staff for a Christmas party. So you turn around, you do the right thing, you try and give your staff a good time. The bar's open, it's on the company or it's on me if you're a sole trader, whatever. We've got the food, enjoy yourselves, have a good night, don't cause any problems. You might have 20 staff, you might have 50 staff, you might have 100 staff. One of them decides to drive home drunk.
Who's on the hook, Dave?
And then who's on the hook? So what started to happen is people stopped saying, well, actually, we won't have a Christmas party. We won't do this.
It literally gets to the point where you get to a certain point of the night and you literally tell people, say, if you've organised it at a certain venue and you've got 40 people there and there's a card behind the bar buying drinks, you literally tell them when whoever's card behind the bar leaves at, say, 10 o'clock, which is still pretty reasonable, you're now paying for your own drinks. If this thing wants to continue, I'd be more comfortable if you went to another venue.
Yeah.
So you actually remove yourself from the venue. So there's a complete separation between any work-related or work involvement in a venue that you end up at where shit might go down.
But when you think about it from the point of view of an average person, you think to yourself, your company's put on a nice thank you at the end of the year, and now they've got to worry about their legal obligations because Tom wants to have too many and drive home.
Yeah.
Like at some point, we've got to get away from this, and we've got to actually get back to saying the person that's responsible for the problem will be the person that pays for the problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And this gets back to everything. It's the same thing. Like even work health and safety. Now, I'm not saying bring in staff that you're a heavy machinery company. You got a lot of dangerous things at someone's finger, someone's arm, whatever. And like you have no obligations to train them up. But at some point, if you have someone that's worked for you and you go, no, They went through training the first 3 months. They knew you can't have a ring on, you can't have chains, you bend over. They do all that. We have an annual yearly refresher just in case. This guy's been here 17 years and he's put his hand through the machine. He's been here 17 years. At what point, unless you turn around, it was a faulty machine, and then you go, well, the machine was faulty, you were meant to have it serviced every 6 months, and you haven't serviced it 6 years. Again, but like we've just got to get back to individual accountability and responsibility. Now, that's not me saying let's have a blanket free-for-all with no liability, but we can't keep fixing everything with something went wrong, we need more laws.
Yeah, I agree. What about, Dave, these overlapping laws or the large, like I read somewhere that there's tens of thousands of pages of federal legislation alone.
Yeah.
Right, with these constant amendment cycles. So constantly dabbling in some aspect of people's lives, how businesses operate, how businesses report. And when we talk about WHS and the rabbit hole that is, and the liabilities now that go to directors and even they assumed officers or officers of the company, which includes the CEO and other C-suite people if something goes pear-shaped. What about something like modern slavery legislation?
Well, I find modern slavery legislation, like from the heart, I give people credit. I like it, right? From your heart. But seriously, you'll have a modern legislation and obligations on companies while everyone's walking around using Apple iPhones.
Yeah.
Driving Teslas.
Yeah.
Wearing Nikes. Do you want to have that conversation? Like, because if you're talking about that, there'll be no EVs, because if people really look into where your cobalt and lithium comes from, who's mining it, how it's mined, and then you talk about what people are getting paid. I think it's Foxconn that do the screening of the iPhone. If you as an individual just take 60 minutes out of your life and you go and do that, you'll walk into your boss and you go, really? Modern legislation, modern slavery legislation, this is a joke. Like, it really is a joke. At some point, the obligation has to just be to the company you are running within the jurisdiction in which you operate. It can't be that you've got to go right down through your supply chain that might be through this company that's then through that backdoor company. It's across this state line that's then across that sovereign state. Like
seriously, like what value? So I'm sure you've seen it, Dave. Some of these big listed companies and the requirements that they have to disclose now on ESG, which includes this type of stuff, and the reams of people or the reams of paper generated by the teams of people who create this stuff. And you say to yourself, does it make shareholders feel better?
No.
Right? In the context of Australia, right, is business A employing their people at the right standard, with the right level of safety, providing the right equipment, yada, 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 yada? Yes, we move on. In the context of Australia, again, are we confident that they're doing everything they need to do in a broader sense to make sure they're complying with all the law? Yep. Now, should that same company that then outsources 15% of its workforce to a low-cost environment in Southeast Asia, right, to what extent do they need to take responsibility for that? If CBA, for example, contracts with Brass Wazoo, third-party labour call centre services in Bangladesh, right, and they've got a contract in that jurisdiction with the Brass Wazoo company, isn't it Brass Wazoo's responsibility to make sure their people are getting treated well?
100%.
Now, to what extent does CBA need to look into there and go, oh, geez, we're not quite sure? Because then you start imposing your values and your standards of how you would treat your employees into another jurisdiction with
Correct.
different culture, different power structures,
100%.
all of that. And why would you do that?
I think it's an insane thing to do. And if you want to do it, like I'll be generous. I'll go the other side and I'll say, from your heart, I see what you're attempting to do. You want to create an environment where the transactions that are going on within industry X and the purchasing and everything, it's fair and equitable, as far as reasonable for all stakeholders at all levels through that transactional process. Okay. Well, then how about we just say no offshoring?
That's right.
Every country must manufacture everything it needs. The only reason you can import anything is that it's not available onshore. Don't give me it costs too much. No, it's not available.
That's right.
That's it. And then you can do away with all this because CBA, every staff member will be based in Australia.
That's what I mean. Obviously, CBA is just an example, but
No,
but I'll take your point.
every company.
So,
if you really want to do it right.
But the moment you say government is not going to impose on CBA how to run its business, right?
And then it imposes on CBA how it's going to run its business.
Let the market do what the market does. Now, as a shareholder, right? As a shareholder of CBA, if I take an affront to how they're operating and the fact that they're outsourcing too many jobs and I'm getting poor customer service and I hear that the outsourced provider over there is treating their people really badly and that offends me, well, then I've got a choice.
Correct.
I can say to myself, I either suck that up because on the balance of probability, the share price is not going to be impacted because they own the Australian mortgage market, or I can have the courage of my convictions and say I can no longer have my 13 shares in CBA. It's an affront to me because they're not doing anything about that.
Well, the other thing to it too is if you really turn around and CBA came out and said, you know what, we do think this modern slavery stuff is too onerous. So to save ourselves from having to do it, we're going to be 100% within the Australian jurisdiction. I hope this makes everyone feel good about what we're doing. By the way, your interest rates are up 50 basis points because that's what the additional cost is. You know what everyone's going to say?
Fine.
Can you outsource at the Brass Wazoo in Bangladesh?
That's what I mean.
This is the harsh realities, and it doesn't even have to be at the large corporate level or the macro level. This overregulation, it hits you in your kids' sport on the weekends. How many volunteers do we now have? You know, how much does it cost to register kids? Because you turned around and you're worried about, a kid fell in a hole on a field that was a bit bad and they did their ankle. That was part of growing up. You play on dog parks. You play on terrible things.
But even Dave, now, so one of the biggest costs for Football Federation Australia and then the individual state federations that get their slice of the regos as well is personal accident.
Yep.
People getting hurt, right? But then the one I really love, because it really gives me the cars, is when
love when you get wound up, Tone.
Is when the council that shall remain nameless, because all councils are the same, but actually maybe not all are the same. Some have got the balls to say, no, we've made a call, grounds are too dangerous, no one's playing this weekend. Some councils will say the ground is open at the hirer's discretion, which basically means council is absolved.
Yeah.
Hirer, Club X.
Yeah.
Should you wish to open up your ground and someone snaps ligaments in the puddles of water, that it would be on your public liability policy, not ours.
But even then, why do we give a shit? Why do we close ground so quickly?
I agree.
One of the fun things growing up playing a real sport of rugby league, not that round ball, girly.
You weren't saying that a couple of weeks ago, were you? When you had your chance.
The things I do for you, Stan. I sat there biting my tongue, pretending soccer's a real game. No, but one of the fun things, and maybe there's a fun aspect when you're playing soccer in the wet, but
there is.
Yeah, because in rugby league or rugby union, as a kid, you'd dive 10 meters out and see if you could slide the whole try line. Right, it was fun stuff. If you got injured, you got injured. When did playing weekend sport become your right to compensation for an injury in your hobby?
Because Dave, I reckon part of this gets back to
the Americanization of Australia.
No, the litigation, increasingly litigious, and subsequent to that is not every parent, a lot of parents trying to manage every outcome, and if the outcome doesn't go their way, then they're seeking compensation of some sort, or they want to vent their spleen at someone.
To me, it's how many kids did you see you signed their cast? They were the cool kid at school.
But I remember last year at my club, we had a game where there was no referee assigned. So I went and got my official referee's uniform, put it on. I went and inspected the pitch, and there were puddles of water, and a lot of people were saying we shouldn't play. I've called the captains in. I've said, listen, we're going to play today. All right? Play to the conditions.
Well, that's the other thing, right?
And then I said, anything stupid where people are diving in and sliding at people's ankles, I'll call it straight away. What did the players do? They responded. It was physical. Some players slipped over. There was apologies when they did because you could tell, but they adopted to the conditions. They played the game, and we managed to complete that game, which saved us having to set up the next day with catch-up games. So just a bit of common sense, but you just can't, Dave. Common sense now, because if something had gone pear-shaped then, then I might have been called in and said, how's the referee? How did you say that was playable?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it reminds me of something Martin Brundle says often in F1 when there's rain on a wet track. Aside from, obviously, he says these are the 20 best drivers on the planet, but he sums up well. He goes, the accelerator works both ways.
Yeah, true.
If the top speed now is 270, not 360, everyone can only get 270. So just like you said, if you turn around, well, our tackles, we can't be like this. This is what we got to do in passing.
That's right.
But it's just another thing, though, that it adds. At the end of the day, if someone says, well, why? What's the premise of this episode? Why are you worried about too many lawyers and too many laws? Well, it comes down to two things. One is you remove the enjoyment from people because you're stopping them from doing things. Or three, you're removing the enjoyment from some things that people won't do. You're precluding it or limiting it. The cost, because this starts adding insurance and everything. So some people you can add $50 a week to anything. It means nothing to them. Other people, it'd break them. Their kids can't afford it. They struggle. And the final thing is that what you're doing is this is part of the problem that's created a generation that, like any resilience, any adaptability and any creativity, because who was it talking about? Someone was talking about film the other day, comedies. They were talking about how a lot of comedies, I can't remember who it was, but some famous comedian, he said, as you see, a lot of great comedies that kids are watching today, and by kid, he's talking to teens and young adults, he goes, is the old stuff, so our stuff. The Will Ferrells, Stillers, Owen Wilson. And he said because people aren't creative anymore because they haven't been allowed to be creative. And if you go and close parks all the time, if you don't let a kid ride a skateboard, ride a push bike, climb a tree, all those things that let them learn what are their boundaries, how do I get better, what hurts, where's the risk. If you don't let them try and make a slingshot, make a bow and arrow, be creative, build their own forts, all these things are part of that development as a kid, that you're testing your own boundaries and you're learning to go beyond boundaries. So as soon as you go, we'd have kids that have never played in the mud. They would never have had a game of soccer or a game of rugby league in the mud. Yeah, absolutely. It just hasn't happened, right? Because everything gets called off. So the detriment of the over legislation, it hits business, it hits community, it hits fun. Like at some point, what we need is what we need, Tony, is what I did in Trump 1.0. For every law that I made, we repealed 2. We need something like that.
I like that.
It's actually something you did that was quite good.
No, but that's something we'll touch on shortly around. Once laws are enacted, Dave, can you think about one federal law in Australia that's been repealed in the past 20 years?
Ducks no longer have to wear pants.
Oh, wow.
Do you remember that episode of The Simpsons?
Yeah.
And then they find out, oh, wait, ducks do have to wear pants. And then they find another law. Oh, no, it's been repealed. But that's a good episode that sums it up. That's really the point.
So I want to touch on another area where you constantly hear feedback around development approvals. So property development, large-scale properties typically, developments, either apartment towers or massive land banks where they're going to carve it up and do what they do with it. Developers will always say it's so costly to get all those approvals and so timely, which hurts the supply of housing, which, is one of the key pieces, one of the variables. So the environmental approval and planning process is an area where this too many laws plays right into it, right? There's too many loopholes to get through. Now, I still think there needs to be a level of government input into these decisions, but it needs to be staggered. Like up to a certain level, you just go, right? If a developer goes and buys 15 houses because he can pay the right price and he wants to knock them all down near a transport hub and put up a 10-story tower, or could be 8, could be the limit, go for your life.
Well, there should be. There's a few things you can do instead of having, as you said, 10,000 sections and clauses. You still can have the legislation, but you can. There's two aspects. You can have the legislation, but you can simplify it. And the other thing gets back to what you hear me say all the time in the podcast. If we raise people to ask, is this right rather than is this compliant?
Yep.
People will inherently start to do the right thing. So using development as an example, why is it that someone's going to do a development on Parramatta Road at 112 Parramatta Road, and they've got to turn around and get, say, a report, on the nature, like an environmental report. And it turns out there's a 3-legged trans black-striped tree frog that once hopped across the back corner, so you can't build there in case he hops back there when he turns around and works out that he's not actually trans and he goes home. So why is it that if you've got an environmental report, if we want to simplify that, why don't we do this? Each council can start doing environmental reports on their entire council.
Yeah.
And when a developer wants a copy for his thing, he just pays a price, and you can sell the same environmental report, right, over and over again.
Yep.
So they don't have to go through that all the time. Then in terms of the actual construction, if you want to say, well, we need to make sure they're compliant because we want to make sure these are quality, they've used the right materials, they're up to standard, we'll turn around the same thing. Remove a lot of the onerousness of tick the box along the way, but let's have the government turn around and if you do a Phoenix bankrupt the company, no, we're going to extend the homeowner's warranty, for example. So it's not 7 years and then all your building can collapse. It's going to be 25 years. And by the way, if you were the director of the company at that time, you can go to prison, right? Mm. And then if we also turn around and say that, within that framework, what we're also then going to do is the same thing with the tradesmen. So we're going to start making sure that we get quality tradesmen that are going in and doing it. So what happens is you don't need to do everything along the way. What happens is fly-by-night, dodgy brothers turn around and they go, oh, this is great. We consider there's all these gaping holes in this legislation, so we'll cut corner A, corner B, corner C. And then they find out that 5 years later, you're doing 10 to 15, you're bankrupt, you'll be paying back everything. Like once you set a really strong example, then you find everyone else goes, it's not worth the risk.
And that has happened.
It doesn't happen.
But to your point, Dave, around environmental impacts and the cross-dressing LGBTQI
frog
dodo bird that has walked on part of the block, I just think there needs to be part of me, and you might judge me for this, but I think you'll get where I'm going. Sometimes I like the Chinese approach, Dave.
I always judge you.
I like the Chinese approach.
I've never stopped judging you.
I like the communist approach.
Yep.
We need a 6-lane highway either way. Your house will be a highway in 3 years' time.
Yeah, there is value in it, but let me be clear. When I talk about environmental stuff, being serious, I don't want to go and just take down all the bushland and bye-bye koalas, bye-bye go in it. I don't want that. One thing I do think we do well today is we are preserving nature better. And when we do construct things, we have a certain requirement for a number of green area. And that comes about from not only the animals, but also from people, right? If you're going to be living 50 stories up in a 5-cube room, you want to be able to have somewhere you can go and feel like you've still got nature. So I don't want to turn around and start allowing development in areas that they don't belong. But yes, as you said, what's Parramatta Road need? Parramatta Road needs to be 3-4 lanes each way into the city, and it probably needs a light rail right up the center of those 3 or 4 lanes. So should we turn around and allow one person to hold that up?
No.
And that's where the Chinese model is. It's, that's where there's the value.
And I look forward, Dave, at some stage before getting our submarines in 50 years' time, the Chinese taking over and building that light rail along Parramatta Road.
Yeah. And they'll probably do such a good job of it too that they'll accommodate those submarines.
That's right. Now, I want to touch on, Dave, the cost of this increased legalisation in everyday life. So we've touched on businesses.
Actually, mind you, let me just clarify something on the Chinese thing. The Chinese do it well. Here's the plan. This is what we're doing. But I still have some question marks over their quality.
Oh, yeah, I get it. Because
when I lived in China, right? If we're on the 6th, it was a 7th floor building. If we're on the 5th, it was 6th floor, right? There was just 1 floor above us. And where we were renting while I was living there was like 4 lanes, 2 lanes each way behind us, the back road. And they were doing brand new construction on the other side. So whatever in your mind, if you think a lane is, I don't know, 3 meters, 4 meters. I'll even go with 5 meters. So 4 of those is 20. Let's add a bit of path. So this building's probably 40 to 50 meters away from where we are. And when they were constructing it, our building was shaking.
Wow.
Yeah. It used to make me a bit nervous.
How funny.
So quality is separate from get it done.
I get it. So the increased cost of legalization of everyday life. So for businesses, we've spoken about SMEs facing, disproportionate compliance burdens compared to large corporates. Legal costs are seen now as a fixed cost as opposed to a one-off. So every year, small businesses would have to allocate a portion of legal costs just to handle the one-off stuff that comes up on top of the legal costs that they might need as part of their contract setting with clients and everything else, right? And then innovation slows with every legal clearance. To your earlier point, they're risk averse. They want to square everything. I remember getting into a rather colourful and robust conversation with the general counsel where I used to work when they were trying to impose restrictions on the business, and I was saying the risk that you're addressing is not yours to address. It is the business, the GM responsible for that business area.
Yeah.
They've got a certain risk appetite and they've got a certain ability to make decisions on risks within certain parameters. That's theirs to call. And you're looking at the legal risk, but if the legal risk imposes on a business and is imposing how they want to design that product or deliver that service, that's their risk to take, not yours to stop.
And also what they do is that they lack the commercial acumen at times, because the other thing that happens is for a figure, let's say risk they're talking about might happen once a year at a cost of $1 million. Right. They then block the other $10 million of business on the basis that you might be out of pocket $1 million.
Because like contractually, Dave, when an entity gets into a contract with another, if you were to remove all risk, you can.
Yeah.
You can actually remove all risk for your business. You mightn't get much done, but.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Well, this gets to the point of actually, before I move on, before I forget, now this is also not me arguing, saying a good business does a pure cost-benefit analysis, and if the costs are in your favor, so be it, because I've mentioned on a previous episode about Ford Pinto, and let's let 3,000 people die because our payouts to their family is cheaper than the decline in the equity price and so on and so forth. So, but we're not talking about everything doesn't have to be life and death. Sometimes it's just purely a business. So, the last thing you're saying, just before I had to mention that before everyone. But Dave, good. The episode before you were saying you were calling out Ford, didn't you? So what?
So we talk about a lot about how there's increased legalization, increased laws that impact businesses, and typically we think of the for-profit industry. But even in the not-for-profit space, some of the governance requirements now on large not-for-profits are similar to ASX boards. So you've got volunteer directors sitting on a board now assuming personal liability.
Which you'd be nuts. I don't know why anyone would take a voluntary board position that takes on the legal risk.
I know, you're asking for trouble.
You're insane. The whole reason why any of us get paid, aside from your skill, is and why you get things like danger money in jobs, is because you're taking on more risk.
That's right. So it's not only businesses and not-for-profits, but then, Dave, at a retail level, at the consumer level, it's even citizens. Contracts, disclaimers, waivers, fine print everywhere. Like how many times you get to the end of something, Dave, and it goes, and you're keen to purchase, and there's a little checkbox down the bottom.
Yeah, no one's read anything.
You just go, you tick, accept all, pay, right, done.
Because technically, if that was literally your a company contract, say a business-to-business contract. So let's say it's Brass Wazoo with Dodgy Brothers. If you got presented with your equivalent of the mobile phone contract, that contract would be sent off to each Office of General Counsel or your legal representatives if you have internal counsel, and they would go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. So technically, as individuals, none of us should just tick at the bottom. We should be reading everything.
That's right.
Now imagine if you said, boss, why were you late to work? Oh, sorry, boss, I got a new phone. I've had that 3.5 days off, gone through Vodafone's terms and conditions.
I know. It's just not right. Anyway,
surely we can get back to you use phone, it make call, it take call, it send text, it takes like.
I know, and I think
done.
And we're going to get to that exact point.
Which, by the way, people are seeing right now, they're watching us on YouTube, the difference between a highly professional C-suite accountant CFO who's prepared, has his talking points, has done his research, and a barber just sits there and bullshits off the cuff.
There you go.
As things come up.
There you go. You couldn't get a better analogy for Dave and I.
That's about it.
This risk
We're
of
yin and yang, yang and yin.
That's right.
The way around.
So this risk aversion, Dave, I came across a term today: defensive lawmaking. Right. So governments typically legislate after failure, scandal, or inquiry. And another one that kind of hit me in between the eyes was royal commissions. Dave, we've had a few. I've had a few. Often result in what? More regulation, more oversight, and criminalisation of previous matters that used to be handled under the civil process.
And I would actually suggest the majority of it falls under that category of defensive lawmaking would be emotional lawmaking.
Go on.
Right? So little Dave was too fat to get across the road before the car came. Yeah. And outside the school, he gets run over. Everyone in New South Wales must drive 40 k's an hour now.
Yeah.
Right? Because fat little Dave's parents are emotional and they've lost little fat Dave and they're like, yeah, we've got another fat kid, but he wasn't quite as fat as Dave, and Dave's our one fat kid, and now he's not, he's flat kid. So we get to the stage where those emotions are driving legislation.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes it's legitimate, but even again, Bondi, we're literally not even at the 24-hour mark when we're recording this, but this thing around gun control, it's an emotional response. That's not the conversation to have right now. In fact, I don't even know if it's a conversation to have ever, because if we're going to turn around, and I know that once is already too many, but in Australia, if we're going to go back to 1996 to the last time, and we think we've got a gun problem in this country and we've got to go back 3 decades, how about we have the honest conversation about Australian values, the people are coming here, all that sort of stuff.
Oh, no, because it's funny you mentioned that, because we won't go too deep on this one, but an American comedian today quoted, Australia had a obviously tragic event yesterday involving guns. America's had 358 of those this year. Australia's really, and then it will Australia's really dangerous.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And you're right. You got to look at it through that lens now.
And if we, and truthfully, what do we do when, right, at this point, 15 people have died. 16, including one of the pricks that did it. But 15 innocent people have died. Hopefully no further more deaths, right? That's 15 too many. So what is it in life we attempt to do when we're talking legislation around risk safety, right? What are we attempting to do? We're attempting to save lives, right?
Mm.
So if you've got to make a decision as a society, as a government, you attempt to save the maximum amount of lives, right? So we're talking gun legislation that we've just lost 15 people. How many people have died of car accidents? So if we said, no, well, it's death. We've got to stop death. Okay, no one owns a car anymore. Everyone's on public transport.
Yeah.
Right? We don't do it because that's just not sensible.
Mm.
And so emotional decision-making starts to drive these sorts of things. Oh, we need more gun legislation. We need this. No, we don't. It's a separate conversation.
Yeah, and I think all of this, Dave, again, I came across another quote today. It was the system with this defensive lawmaking and political risk is now all around, regulation, lawyers, compliance frameworks. But the system's now focused on avoiding blame rather than achieving outcomes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the lens that they take. The defensive mindset
because
is...
we can't say sorry.
But the defensive mindset is, Dave, like in a sporting analogy, I'd rather not lose than maybe risk a little bit to win.
Yeah, the former English Test cricket philosophy before they went all baseball.
That's right.
But actually, I'll tell you a funny one. And before we get all the hate mail, this is me quoting verbatim Quinn Dale, the comedian. I do find it funny, but it's not me. So if you want to send any hate mail, send it to Quinn. Quinn says, I think he said 40,000. He said 40,000 people were killed in car accidents. He says 40,000 people were killed from gun deaths in the US last year. They want to take away our guns. He said 55,000 people were killed in car accidents last year. He said, are they going to take away our Asians?
I'll pay that.
Send the hate mail to Quinn Dale.
Now, Dave, let's kind of there's a couple other areas I want to touch on. Has law replaced trust? So let's explore this a bit. So there's an increased reliance on contracts over relationships,
Yeah.
compliance over competence, and legal enforcement over social norms, right? And this kind of leads, so if you contrast this with earlier eras where there were fewer rules, greater discretion, and a higher tolerance for human judgment, right?
Well, remember we used a man's word was his bond. His handshake was his bond. Remember those?
Yeah,
We're still from that era.
Yeah, that's right.
So which is actually how you and I have done things, because when the podcast even came on board, we've ticked all the legal boxes that we've had to, along the line after, but we started doing what we were doing. Went, we'll get that done.
That's right.
Handshake. Dave, I'll put some money into X. I'll do, we didn't need to have a contract nutted out before everything started, because there was trust between us of what was going to happen.
Yep.
And that gets back to, again, if you're asking what's right rather than what's compliant, what will happen as a man, you wouldn't rip someone off. You wouldn't need the contract to be enforced because you'd know you're doing the wrong thing. But that also takes that type of approach takes a whole of society approach.
Yeah,
because
agreed.
the reason would be Dave shook Tony's hand, Dave ripped Tony off, Dave's ostracized from the community, right? That was the enforcement.
Yeah.
We didn't need the courts. It was enough that I could no longer go to the pub. I couldn't play the sport, walk through the neighborhood. Not that I'd be bashed, but I was known as you can't trust him, screwed Tony over.
Yeah.
There's a lot of value in that in community.
I agree. So let's balance the discussion a bit, Dave. Where are some areas where regulation has delivered value? So consumer protections,
Yes.
financial advice and banking. Right?
Yeah, because I know
To a
I'm going
point.
to buy that snake oil believing it's going to grow my hair back.
That's right, yeah. Workplace safety improvements, right?
Yep.
So deaths at work, the data's clear on that one, fine. Environmental safeguards to a point, right? And then anti-discrimination, human rights. Now, I'm sure you would argue, and I would agree that that's gone a little too far, because now I think it's imposing and impinging on it's impinging on free speech, and it's also a lot of this discrimination and a lot of these laws, how they bind companies into locking their employees around how they behave as well.
Well, I think we jumped the
workplace
shark.
environment.
The reason why, like when we were talking about health and safety, getting to where you said, impinging on free speech, I think because we jumped the shark on health and safety, because then we started to think, you should be safe from offence.
That's right.
It's like, that's so subjective.
Like the bullying piece.
Yeah.
Not being supported, feeling insecure. There's a whole raft of things that kind of opens up. And then that's all subjective, right? Like you make me feel uncomfortable, Dave, in the studio because you're nude or you're not nude.
But you knew beforehand we're doing this episode naked.
That's right.
But and that's part of the problem is if you're going to turn around and allow subjectivity into legislation, and that's what you never want. You don't want subjectivity. You want things to be pretty well clear. Now, again, you're never going to hit utopia. How someone interprets things are different. And actually, from a legal perspective, how you interpret a policy or legislation, there are actually two ways. And it's the second way that I prefer, even though it's the lesser of the used. So the first way to interpret, if you pick up legislation or a policy, is a literal interpretation. What does it say? What does that literally mean? And the second approach is if you're getting an absurd outcome is what was the purpose? So if people you look at your policies and if you look at legislation, it'll have a preamble, what's the purpose of this? So in other words, it's a purposive approach. So, was let's use speeding, right? We turn around and went, okay, we've got an issue. We want, there's more cars on the road now. They're more affordable. There's more built-up areas. We've got a greater risk of people being hit by a car or car accidents happening. So we're going to start seeing speed limits. Okay. Well, the purpose of that was to reduce, we turned around and said, okay, you can only go this fast because this is how long it takes a car to pull up at 60 k's an hour. Great. Well, the cars have got so much better now at pulling up and doing things that we should be extending our speed limits, but we're shrinking them again.
Yeah.
So the purpose of that was to minimize the risk But now we've just, oh shit, people are so used to driving 60, revenue's down a bit. Let's drop it to 30 and we'll start pinning it. We'll get 10 years out of it before we need to drop it to 20. And then we'll tell people they got to walk again and that ducks have to wear pants.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think, Dave, so the issue is not existence of law, but proportionality. Right? To what extent does it extend, and to what extent is it fit for purpose to drive the right outcomes, correct?
Correct.
How are we going to wrap this one up, Dave? I want to wrap up on some economic and social impacts. So economic drag, compliance costs acts as a hidden tax. Productivity impact, right? The ability to get through stuff is actually impacted by these additional overhead.
Yep.
And we've got a massive productivity problem in Australia.
It's huge.
Right.
We've
actually gone
productivity
backwards.
mire for about a decade or something.
Like our raw GDP, I'm sure, has gone backwards.
Yeah.
If you exclude migration. Social impact, Dave. So there's a fear of legal consequences that discourage what? Volunteering.
Yeah.
Community leadership. Entrepreneurship. Like if you look at it, Dave, how many entrepreneurs would be out there who'd be willing to take, and this is one thing I do admire about America, right? They literally give people who want to take a risk every opportunity to succeed and climb multiple rungs up the ladder, right? Yeah. And even when you fail, with best efforts, you can climb again, right? Whereas here, our mindset is not entrepreneurial. And we don't, increasingly, Dave, people, not so much young people, but maybe 40-year-olds and above, increasingly, they don't need to take a risk. Why should I have to be entrepreneurial to build a business and build wealth? I'll just negatively gear 3 properties, which is a whole separate podcast in itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but it is an important thing because to be entrepreneurial, right? You need 3 things, really. Yep. Obviously, you need your idea, whatever it is. You need your drive that you're going to commit to it, but you need your capital. And the more compliance you put for a startup, the larger the barrier to entry. Now, somewhere like Australia, where we are overregulated and we do get ripped off at the supermarket because basically we've got 2.
Banks.
Right?
4.
Banks.
You know what I mean?
Petrol stations.
And now they're
to our American listeners and especially to our listeners in Cupertino, California, if I've pronounced it correctly, and Ashburn, Virginia, that download our episodes within the first few minutes each week. Petrol stations, gas station, it's gas. That's why big companies love regulation, because they know the competitors.
They can squeeze them out, Dave.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
you and I grew up. Remember the local grocery store or the corner shop, the milk bar.
Well, we used to call it the wog shop.
That's what I mean.
Because we're a racist white family from Blacktown.
You get fish and chips, get some scallops, grab some bread, a couple of steaks for dinner, some sausages. You go and spend $30-$40.
Now, speaking on that, there's something else that regulation starts to do. Those shops, for example, they knew their clients. They knew who turned up once a month. They knew who turned up every week. They knew who would turn around every 3 months and ask for credit and then not pay for 2 months. So what would happen is when Tony went in and you bought your scallops, your chips, your whatever, you get extras. Tony's a good client. He's always here. I like Tony. Look after the family, right? Does McDonald's do that for anyone?
Not a chance.
Yeah. Does KFC do that for anyone?
No chance.
So the bigger the business you get, the less you get. So I've had clients where literally, Dave, I forgot my wallet. Yeah. Can I drop it back? Now, it used to be a normal. People would politely say that, knowing what the answer was. Now people generally in fear, like you're going to hold them there, because if you turn around, Woolworths wouldn't let you take. My wife needs the bread and the milk. Can I take it home and drop it back? A petrol station, go to a petrol station when your card's not working, it's fill up. And you watch the forms you have to fill in, the ID you have to provide to drive off over $100 petrol. I've literally said to people, and this happens, people will turn up thinking this happened this week. Client turns up, he thinks he's got cash in his wallet, and he did. He had Canadian dollars. So he was short, and he always pays cash. I turned around and said, close enough, don't worry about it. Merry Christmas, right? You think Woolworths finds out you're $25 short? Don't worry about it. Merry Christmas. The ham's on us. Yeah. Have a good time. So these regulations, they really start to damage the mum and dad type business, the small business, the ones that are part of your community, that the times you're down, they're there for you. They're not worried you're a bit short.
That's a great segue, because I want to close on Australia prides itself, Australian values. Australia prides itself on fairness, common sense and the fair go, right? So this
that definitely doesn't sum up this podcast.
No. So the challenge is whether this ever-expanding legal framework, Dave, is it protecting those values of a fair go and fairness, or is it suffocating them slowly?
No, it's suffocating. In fact, one's completely separate, and I don't know why this has been in my head all day since I saw it this morning. It relates to yesterday. If you've seen the video of when they get the second gunman down and there are some bystanders, the police, and they give him a kicking and whatnot, they interviewed one of the guys. It was like the second or third one onto the bridge. And he says, I got him with a bit of a dog shot. It's probably the wrong thing to do, but, he deserved it, blah, 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 right? And my mind is just going to, you know what? If this wasn't what it was and a wake-up call for Australia, they'd be charging him.
Yeah.
The police would be charging him for assault because we had him. He was under arrest. He's on the ground. You've gone in and you and that shouldn't be in my mind.
I know. I'm hearing you. That was a great chat, Dave. Great chat. So I would say that we agree that we are there are too many lawyers and too many laws. And it not only does it impact like tangible things that we do in business, in the not-for-profit space, in the for-profit space, and the citizens.
They're sucking the fun out of life.
But it's also impacting our values.
Yeah.
Great chat, Dave. What do we always say?
You have a right to be wrong.
Thanks, mate. See ya.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. Like us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.